Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at 9:02 in the morning. We're back to talk more about S122, which is an act relating to economic and workforce development. We have a number of people that we're going to chat with this morning. I think just to lay the groundwork on where S122 is, we're waiting to hear from our appropriations conferees of what monies are in the budget, which is going to determine what actually is in 122. I know that we've had some conversations already with Ellen and Linda, and I thought we could chat a little bit more about some pieces that are in there for the SBDC and Sustainable Jobs Fund. So Ellen, Linda, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Linda, do you want to come on camera too? Maybe Jeff could pop off camera since we'll be testifying first. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk again with you all. For the record, Ellen Kaler, Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and Linda.
Yes. Hi. For the record, Linda Rossi, State Director, Vermont Small Business Development Center. Thank you.
Yeah. So I recognize that you all are in a really difficult position because you don't know whether or not there's going to be any funding for S122. Totally know that you all would love to be able to fund probably all of what's in S122, and then there's just the reality of the very challenging funding budget environment that we're in. I will say, as an update to Section 2, which is what Linda and I are going to be speaking about with you or talking with you about, is that we did learn yesterday that House Appropriations, or the conferees, the appropriations conferees, did restore $50,000 to the Vermont Professionals of Color Network, which the House Appropriations Committee had included, but the Senate Appropriations had cut, or something like that. Anyways, so they are now in the budget for $250,000, is my understanding. Section 2B of S122 was proposing to get them an additional $100,000. So the good news is that they have been restored to $250,000, which was what the governor's recommend was. And so I think you could choose to leave it at that. If there's not sufficient funding, we at least have got them restored to a level that is strong and what the governor had recommended. In terms of I just want to make just remind everybody on Section 2D, the resource guide, while it names the Sustainable Jobs Fund, those funds literally would just be passing through us to a collaborative of various business support organizations that are proposing to put this resource guide together. So I don't feel like I can really represent that initiative fully. We had just offered to provide a vehicle for those funds to go to that resource guide if funding exists to support it this year. The group is ready to go. They are excited about the prospect. I think the testimony you've received shows that it's clearly needed and that it would be a very valuable resource to have. So we would strongly support that request if the funding exists. That being said, if there are limits to what is available, personally, from the Sustainable Jobs Fund's perspective, I would advise that the highest priority in Section 2 is Section 2C, the business advising funding support, additional funding support for the SBDC. And I'll let Linda speak to the why, but I think in these times of federal budget cuts, in times of tariffs that are putting a lot of pressure on small businesses, this is about retaining and adding some additionality to a very core piece of infrastructure of business supports that this state woefully needs. And as you all know from our conversations over the course of the session, we don't spend enough time or money or have enough boots on the ground supporting the 27,000 small businesses in our state that have less than 20 employees. And so honestly, this is a kind of a drop in the bucket and well below the actual need that the SBDC really is faced with in terms of serving existing businesses in the state. So from my perspective, number one priority for Section 2 would be Section 2C. And the second priority would actually be the expanding the legal services at the Vermont Law and Graduate School. Again, in these times of federal budget cuts and tariffs, a lot of small businesses are trying to navigate for the first time. How do I manage tariffs? Like, what am I legally, how do I set my systems up? What is really needed? And this kind of free legal service for the smallest of our businesses is so critical. And so I would also really encourage you to prioritize that request as well. So I will leave it there and let Linda speak for the SBDC, and then happy to discuss anything more with you all.
Thanks, Ellen.
Great. Thank you all. It's very nice to see you. I wish I was there in person, but this is a great alternative to be able to speak with you this morning. Again, my thanks for your support and interest in having us back to sort of touch on a few elements of S122. I'll just sort of pick up with what Ellen said. Thank you, Ellen. You've heard what we do at the Vermont SBDC, the one-on-one, confidential, no fee business advising. You've heard who we serve, statewide entrepreneurs and business owners, and when all stages of business development from start to transition of ownership, and on what topics. You've heard us talk about helping businesses through financial, marketing, operations, management. And so, where we are right now and for the foreseeable future, we've been through recessions, pandemic, natural disasters, and now this uncertainty for small business owners to plan. What's the impact of tariffs? How long will they be on? How do they preserve the cash flow that is coming in and going out of their business to maximize their likelihood of survival? All of these things you can imagine is consuming our day-to-day to try to do as much as we can to be effective, not only in the one-on-one work, but also to reach out and to coordinate with our partners, to industry groups, so that we can provide any guidance to a wider group of members by industry sector. So that's a little bit of the backdrop. You know that our services can be counted on due to 33 years of proven results. Those outcomes are verified by our clients and are attributed to the work that SBDC has had with the business owner. So really, for us, the SBDC has limitations and rules in federal statute. We're not allowed to charge fees for our services. That puts us in a different framework than some other organizations that are able to charge fees or fundraise in other avenues. The SBDC is built on a funding model of 3 financial stakeholders: federal, state government, and higher education. So again, our host and our employer is the Vermont State College System at Vermont State University. I think the most helpful thing I can say to you today is, why does this matter so much and why now? And that is because we're required, as always, to have this one-to-one non-federal match to the federal dollars. And at least half of that non-federal match has to be in cash. So again, we thank the state for that amount that we get, which is half. The balance of that match includes a waived indirect amount from our host employer. Going forward, they have expressed that they are unable to waive that same level of indirect match that they have in the past. I will know the exact amount later this summer, but as of now, I anticipate that will be around $150,000 in a loss of match. Therefore, I would say there's 2 significant challenges that are happening for the SBDC at this time, and not just a snapshot for the moment, but as I see out on the horizon over the next couple of years. The loss of match, if we are not able to get to one-to-one, we will not be able to accept the federal grant funds from that are already allocated to the Vermont SBDC. So while more state funds don't automatically get us more federal funds, we want to be able to bring to Vermont all the federal funds that have already been allocated and not leave anything on the table. With the federal cuts to other programs that support small businesses nationally, we know, we're experiencing it now, there is already greater demand being put on the SBDC to fill in that gap. We see that continuing. So the increase in S122 of $300,000 for the Vermont SBDC will allow us to accept the full federal funds. It'll allow us to avoid cutting staff, and it'll allow us to serve our small businesses so they have the greatest chance of survival at this crucial time. I'll stop here and take any questions that you have. And again, I appreciate your invitation, your interest and support of our work and small business owners.
Thanks, Linda. Questions? Linda, the way the language, and I'm trying to track this down now too, but with that additional 300,000 in the language is linking it to your base?
Yes.
Is that increasing base, or is that one-time funds, that extra 300,000?
The request is to increase to the base. We have experienced in the past where an increase was planned for the base, but then ended up one-time money. A situation like that resulted in us hiring an advisor and then letting an advisor go. And so the stability to the base is what is needed to be able to ensure that we draw down the full federal allocation to SBDC. Thank you.
Okay. John?
Just to make sure I understand that, thank you, Linda, is the idea that by going into the base, can you sort of make that a little more clear for me? Like how that leads to the full federal drawdown in a way that a one-time does not. I can just use that one more time. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So every year, even though the SBDCs have been around nationally for 45 years, every year we have a proposal to accept the next year's federal allocation. And in that proposal, we are required to show a one-to-one match. And that is in the base. And so the non-federal match, at least half in cash, most SBDCs, and again, that is not, relevant to go into the weeds on right now, but the majority of SBDCs have that non-federal all in cash, because imagine what you could do if you had really one-to-one cash. But we are required to have the one-to-one in place, signed off, and demonstrated that it's in place in order to receive the federal funds for the next year.
Okay, that really helps me. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the question.
And sorry, just to further clarify that the 300,000 addition to the base would help replace the 150 that you may lose from your host site.
Yes, if we do not have funds to replace that, we would not be able to accept the full federal that we have allocated to Vermont. We know with an increase of 300 in cash, we are able to serve 200 more Vermont small business owners in our one-to-one as well.
With the other 150.
Yes, I mean, the reality is that the cash allows us to pay for advising hours and to have it directly benefit Vermonters. The loss of the 150 anticipated is not cash. It is in non-cash, but it is still a requirement of our getting to that one-to-one.
Okay.
I know this is somewhat, until I worked for the SBDC, this sort of grant language budget building was not familiar to me. So I appreciate your asking questions to gain clarity.
Linda, could I just ask you to put a finer point on that? So
Sure.
if you do not receive at least 150 and BTSU says we can't cover indirect anymore, then that 150 in essence represents an advisor, which
Yes,
means that if that advisor is lost, if you have to cut by a staff position, that means 200 businesses would not be served. That
correct.
just at steady state. And so the extra 150 above the backfill gets you 200 plus businesses supported from current steady state level. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, thank you, Linda. I know you're hosted by the Vermont State College System, right? And
Yes,
they're the ones who can't match in kind for you?
that's right. I did a little bit of an analysis over the last several years because of the way the calculation and the formula is on what that indirect amount is. There's a total indirect that is factored that they share with me. We pay them a percentage of that to do shared services, IT, HR, payroll, etc. The rest of that, they agree to waive. They have to agree to that waiver, and they have said that that is too much for them to continue to waive. And again, I have not had a final number, but looking back at the last couple of years of rounds of doing this, my anticipation is a loss of $150,000, to which we would then not be able to get that amount from the federal government. So we would not only.
Does it also mean you have to pay them for those services?
So yes, for example, the indirect calculation for 2025 is roughly $400,000. We pay them 75. They waive the rest. And so that is the part that they have expressed that they are unwilling and unable to do going forward.
So, I'm sorry, so not only is it an in-kind loss, but it's also a dollar loss because you have to pay them. That's what I'm trying to understand.
That's right. We do pay them. And of course, like everyone else, payment for medical benefits, all of those other pieces have gone up and up and up every year. And so the pie that's available for me to pay advisors to serve Vermonters has already shrunk. Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to figure the numbers out. So if their in-kind is at 400,000, you pay them 75, so that leaves 325. Where did the 150? Where I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand that.
They have, in our last rounds of discussions, agreed to waive a portion still, but not the whole 325. So I'm
Okay.
anticipating that they will be inclined to waive half roughly, but not the rest. So I'm anticipating a loss of 150.
Okay, so previously they've been waiving the 325?
Yes, it's changed over the years because it's based on a personnel line item.
Yeah.
But it's gone right around 275 to 325. And so, yes, that is the amount that we're expecting will not be waived, and it will be something more like half of that.
Okay, so their costs went up about 50. And it looks like they're cutting their in-kind contribution as well. By
Yes.
100.
The in-kind may be cut 150 plus the expectation of our paying out of our grant funds to those shared services continues to go up.
A little disappointed, I guess, with all the dollars that we're providing the state college system.
I think there's an opportunity here, truly, to have a holistic approach to how what the SBDC does benefits future business owners who are in our colleges today, in our state college system. And I welcome that wholeheartedly. I have many ideas, and I know that with the relatively new leadership in place at both the chancellor and the president's office, I look forward to those continued opportunities to be able to leverage everything that we all do to maximize those futures for Vermonters.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate what you do and certainly appreciate what the state colleges do as well. But, you know, we're expanding 802 opportunities. Means we're funneling more dollars into the state colleges as well. Yeah, yeah. We just need to have a conversation, I guess, that understand the reasoning why they don't feel they can continue the support that they have given SBDC over the year at the same level. And I know their costs are rising too, but.
Like I said, I do think there's incredible opportunities to look at this holistically. The SBDC being embedded in the higher ed system provides a link between our youth entrepreneurship programs in our career and technical high schools as a feeder system into our state colleges, as well as in the classroom opportunities for interns and our 500 small business owners a year to be linked to those students and faculty. I know they believe deeply at the leadership of our higher ed institutions in that connection with the small business community. I think it's yet to be realized, and I truly think there's opportunity here. So I would be happy to join or do anything I can to facilitate or connect with any conversations that would better, solidify these opportunities going forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions for Linda? No, did you have?
No, like that, also, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll continue to have conversation with our conferees. We've had these conversations with them previously. Now that we have better information, we can relay that to them as well.
Great.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much for your
Been
time and your
helpful.
effort.
Yes, thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Ashlyn, good morning.
Planning on joining the Zoom, but I think that I will, so just in case I need to show a document.
I think it'd be good,
Okay.
if you can share, the language that you're looking for,
Sure.
explain what you're trying to, what you need to accomplish.
Well, while I'm doing that, good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Ashlyn Doyon, and I'm the Director of Policy in the Treasurer's Office. I'm here this morning to talk about a language request that we hope that you will consider for the S-122. So you will all probably remember last year, though there are some new members on your committee, we worked with you all to pass the baby bonds bill. And what the bill ended up doing was ask the treasurer's office to submit to you a report detailing a couple of different study questions with respect to a statewide baby bonds program. The bill also authorized us to conduct a pilot for baby bonds to sort of inform those study questions. And over the past year, we've been working on fundraising philanthropically for the baby bonds pilot, as well as program design questions. Since we passed our bill, a number of other baby bonds pilot programs have been passed across the country. And so there's a lot more information that's starting to be generated nationwide as to the impacts of these types of programs. We have a language request that we had originally presented to the appropriations committees that does a couple of things, but primarily what it does is it establishes a special fund for the pilot program. No money deposited into the special fund, but just the special fund as an accounting mechanism separate from the baby bonds trust account that the bill established. And that's because the trust account, when we one day hope to set up the sort of statewide fully fledged baby bonds program, will be invested in a long-term way so that those assets grow over time when the participants can then claim their baby bond when they turn 18. But for the pilot program, the investments are, it's a 3 to 5 year pilot program rather. And so the investments are not going to be invested in such sort of a multi-generational and long-term way. Additionally, we want to make sure that those philanthropic donations that we believe that we have lined up to fund the pilot program will be able to be accounted for separately and not commingled with any other funds that may be put into the trust eventually, hopefully. And so the language before you, it does a couple of things. It sets up that special fund. It sort of separates out the pilot language from the pilot proposal from the initial bill more clearly, and also sets up a few reporting deadlines for us to come back to you on with the information that the pilot produces. So again, the enabling legislation that you passed last year already allows us to do the pilot. This just sort of codifies it more concretely based on the information and research that we've been able to acquire in the past year. We did submit a report under the Economic Empowerment Division in January, detailing fully all of the progress on the pilot program so far this year, as well as on Vermont Saves. Both of those reports were combined into one for the Economic Empowerment Division. So I'm not sure if, I know we've already submitted this language to the chair. I'm not sure, does it make sense for me to sort of read through this language, or what's sort of the best way to go about it, do you think?
So it may be a good idea just to back up a little bit and explain to the new members exactly what the baby bond program is.
Yes. Sure. So baby bonds generally are a concept to bridge generational wealth equity gaps. The idea is that the government would invest a nominal sum for babies after their birth in a trust account that the government manages until their 18th birthday, and they're eligible to claim the baby bond. So in Vermont, our proposal is that we invest $3,200 for every baby in Vermont born on Medicaid. That's about 2,000 babies per year and about 40% of the births that we have in the state. 60% of births in rural areas, it's closer to. By the time those children reach their 18th birthday, we expect that number to have grown to be about $20,000 based on sort of historical rates of return and the risk that we expect to put into the portfolio and what we expect that to gain over time. At the time that an individual would claim their baby bond, there are 4 accepted uses generally for that money. One is for secondary education of some kind. The second is to buy a home in Vermont, to roll over into a retirement account, or to start a small business in Vermont or to start a business in Vermont with a couple of different guardrails. And, there's a lot of evidence that supports baby bonds as improving socioeconomic prospects for rural kids, for kids that come from socioeconomically disadvantaged families, to help close wealth gaps among different sort of racial disparities. And, so the state of Connecticut has a baby bonds program. At one time, this was contemplated as a nationwide endeavor in Congress. I don't think that that's really on the table anymore. And Treasurer Pieciak is a sort of huge proponent of the potential that this type of program could have, specifically, I think, for low-income and rural kids in the state. And so I think last year, we had a lot of discussion around what outcomes could look like in Vermont for kids. We had a lot of discussion around sort of what groups should be eligible for baby bonds and what those thresholds should be, as well as sort of like what the generalized uses should be. There were questions about, should they have to go to a secondary institution in Vermont? Should they be able to take that money outside of Vermont to go to a school? So we had a lot of these discussions. I think when the bill passed as sort of a report back and a pilot, that was a reflection of this idea in practice in the United States still being quite novel, but there being a lot of support for some model like this, and helping to, raise up these kids and this generation, future generations, but wanting sort of more evidence to support the state financial commitment that would be required to support it going forward. We estimate that it would cost about $6 million per year, every year, to support the program ongoing. And so the pilot program, we are contemplating doing, we would sort of invest for a few years philanthropic funds, and then we would provide a baby bonds benefit to probably a group of kids. I think the latest iteration of the pilot that we are considering is a cohort of kids in the Northeast Kingdom that would be graduating high school, and we would monitor and track their sort of progress over the years after they receive that sort of financial influx, and study how it changes their outcomes. Any other questions on the baby bonds in general?
Sorry, so what you're looking at is a separate fund. We've established a fund. We've established all the parameters around a fund. We did that last year. We're looking at a separate fund.
Yeah.
That will be for 3 to 5 years only. Right?
Yeah, we expect to expend all of the money in this pilot through the use of the pilot. I think we will be we're hoping that philanthropic funds cover the whole cohort that we would like to do. And then we're going to have to find administrative expenses for salary and benefits for our financial empowerment director, and in partnership with the sort of third parties that we'll need from somewhere. Perhaps philanthropic contributions will cover it, but we might have to find them somewhere else. I'll note that I made a request of the conferees yesterday afternoon, because we upgraded the unclaimed property general fund transfer amount based on our holder receipts. So we had let them know we had a few $100,000 extra to send to the general fund. And I wrote a note to the conferees and said, hey, baby bonds pilot, administrative expenses. I chuckle because I know that there are so many competing needs, but we're going to have to find that money from somewhere. I think we will expend it all. So this will be a special fund that's created for this purpose and then at some point closed out.
And it's not for babies that are born, it's for, you're setting it aside for teenagers?
Yeah.
For the 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, so that because if
So it won't
we,
have the opportunity to grow the way
yes,
the program is originally designed.
yes. So the pilot will be more expensive per individual because we're hoping to get the information within 3 to 5 years. So we don't have the time to wait for babies to grow up. We have to sort of just start with the amount that we need and then study it.
And I guess, looking at the two bills side by side, it looks like what you're also asking for is the ability to do rulemaking around how the money can be used without the parameters that were in the bill from last year.
For the pilot design.
Yes.
Yes, so we need to set up some more parameters around the pilot than we originally put into the enabling legislation. So this language sort of enumerates the to-dos for the program design, sets up the special fund that's required, and also creates these report back dates. We didn't know when we proposed the pilot as sort of a end of session compromise, if you will, for the bill last year, that there were going to be all of these steps. Having pursued further, we realized that there are more sort of steps and decision points needed, and it makes sense to have statute to support that work.
And if we do nothing, you could still use the fund that we created last year.
So our treasury operations and finance and management team has told me that it goes against some of the government accounting standards that they're required to adhere to. And so really, in order to be able to accept these philanthropic donations and to be able to make these types of expenditures, we really need the special fund. So it's kind of a go forward or not. In order to execute on the pilot, the sort of the way that we think that we need to, we need a special fund created.
Okay, so what you have in subsection B are on top of what's in statute already. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not supplanting that. It's in addition to the pilot or the design of Baby Bond, the program.
Yes, so if you look up here, so 609 implementation, that's in the bill already. Everything that's underlined here would be added to the enabling legislation, which includes the entirety of subsection B in the pilot design.
But it's consistent with the intent of A. What you were gonna do, this pilot design was a part of the original intent, do I understand that? We just didn't know exactly, and now we're spelling it out, what that is.
Yes, that's what
Okay.
that's said much more coherently than I've communicated, but yes.
But by reading the strike through language, we're seeing, the suggestion was that something like this would be in the offing, and now there's, what's in B is really clarifying what the former language had gestured at without making explicit.
Yes, so some of the things in the pilot design, subsection B. So they are things that we talked about with respect to the sort of whole program last year. So, number 6, creating partnerships with organizations around the state to support the program and provide feedback on wraparound services. So we had a lot of conversations last year about how if we were to have the fully fledged program, how would we support families raising children knowing that they were going to have this sort of financial windfall at their 18th birthday? Number 2, identifying research and evaluation partners. I mentioned at the beginning of my testimony that there are a number of other sort of pilot programs that have been authorized and come online. So it's possible And we talked about this in our January 15th report, that a philanthropic entity will support a pilot program in multiple states. And so it's possible that we might end up benefiting from sort of a larger gift that other states are doing at the same time. We'll need to create arrangements with other programs in order to execute. And so there are a lot of variables with the pilot design that we're trying to capture here in statute. And a lot of the sort of variables and unknowns are a result of us sort of trying to gather this information and stand up the pilot absent state resources. So it gives us, I think, the sort of necessary authorities and flexibility to continue with that work.
As a follow-up, have you mentioned a cohort of, I think, older students that are in the Northeast region? How large is that cohort? Are you thinking of 1 through 7 in who that cohort may be?
So the size of the cohort likely determined by the amount of money that we're able to bring in.
All right, so that you don't have an idea for, ideally it would be blank number of students. It's really just, let's see what.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, there would be some sort of scale where we can get, reasonable survey amounts and data. I think, that's probably a question for more of an academic question as to what the adequate scale is to get the research that you need. We're just going to do the best that we can, the most effective pilot that we're able to put forward.
There wasn't some understanding ahead of time, like, well, it's got to be at least. If it's got to be at least 50, it makes no sense. I'm just.
I definitely think we're thinking more than 50. I think we're talking like a class similar to what would be, 2008.
So it is meant to sort of to mimic what we're looking to establish in 20 years. Okay,
Yes.
that's helpful to me. Thank you.
Yeah, so, and also just to highlight again, this language doesn't contemplate any resources, just the structure.
Did you have a question?
Yes.
I don't remember, it's just to refresh my memory. Are people or babies automatically signed up for this, or is there a process that parent needs to accept to gift it?
So under the fully fledged program, they would be automatically enrolled. Of course, we would have their Medicaid records, and we would have records of their mothers being on Medicaid. For the pilot program, I think that's to be determined. I think that, of course, like no one would be forced to be in it. But I can't really imagine a high school student who would turn it down.
Yeah, so would it be student or would it be the parent that would accept on behalf of the student?
That's a really good question. If we're talking about 18-year-olds, I think that's probably to be determined, and I'm not sure to what extent a parent is able to sign on at that time, or if we catch them before their 18th birthday, or I'm just not sure the particulars of the administration to answer that question.
If they're signing, I would imagine be a contract of some sort.
I think maybe, well, I'm not sure whether it would be a contract or, if they're going to agree to report back on data and surveys, some sort of agreement.
So 18-year-olds can sign contract, but
Right, but a 17-year-old couldn't. So I think these are really good questions, and I'm not sure. I think there are probably best practices that other pilots are using that we're going to be able to kind of copy.
and they still, if I remember right, in the original language, there were educational pieces in there that they had to parents and the student, once they get to a place where they're getting close to wanting to use that money, would have to take some educational courses on financial literacy and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's the wraparound services in this program design, uh, guidance, research and evaluation partners, outreach to potential participants, that those are all the things that we're contemplating here. Much of what we're going to be able to offer is dependent upon, you know, resources available to conduct the pilot, but in an ideal situation, we would essentially replicate exactly what the experience would be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there are any strings attached to the funds that they may require certain things to happen as well. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so I think, yeah, still a lot of unknowns that I can't.
Yeah, and I think that's probably more for an advisory committee to pick up and
Yes.
flesh out what things should be.
Yeah.
I imagine whoever's providing the dollars, they want to make sure that they're being used well and that the recipients are having some kind of educational component as to what they can do with that money. And certainly if we start providing state dollars, we want to make sure that people are well aware of what that money can do for them and how they can move forward with their lives and have a better life.
Yes, definitely. Okay.
Any more questions for Ashley? Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Get out of your Zoom now. Good luck with the rest of your work.
And can you just forward that language? Are people all right with,
It's already on our website.
are people okay with this in 122?
I love it. I think it's great. I wish it was there when my kids were kids.
Babies. Okay.
It's great.
So if you can just forward it to Rick, and just copy me on it and Edie and we'll have, we can have Rick inserted into 122.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
We're gonna reverse the order, because Colin's first.
This is my wife. I'm not sure the baby's on that. Okay, that's fine.
Appreciate it. And food stamps, all that stuff.
Okay.
Living in the housing projects.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here today. My name is Hans van Ries. I'm managing director of a company called Westport Hospitality. We are a local business operating Hotel Vermont and the Courtyard Burlington Harbor Hotel. Always confusing to folks. They think that's a Marriott. It's a franchise, but it's locally owned and operated, as many properties are. We are in downtown Burlington. Previously, I used to run Trapp Family Lodge for about 10 years, 11 years in Stowe. So I've been in Vermont for about 30 years. And I've seen tourism and travel trends change over time. I'm excited that part of this bill, 122 Section 10, is addressing this forming of a task force to study the feasibility or the thoughts behind a convention center and performance facility. I have seen over the years how demand is shifting and how the tourism industry in Vermont and tourism and travel industry in Vermont has grown. Like you all know, the data, we're $4 billion industry, employing about 30,000 people in the state of Vermont. So, and an important resource for tax income resource for the state. We always say, we're in this together. Every dollar we earn in tourism, the state participates in that as well, and gross receipts taxes. So, the Burlington hotels have looked before. I would say the Lake Champlain Chamber has looked before and done a study before on the feasibility of a convention center, and so this is not a new topic that comes up, but I think now the time is ripe to do this. We see an increase in hotel rooms. We see a shift in travel. We feel we're missing out as a state on a lot of meetings business that that currently is going elsewhere in other New England states because we just don't have a facility. Now, this came to be as an example, the Vermont Captive Insurance Association, which is an important part, obviously, of our economy. That industry is. They've been hosting their annual meeting in Vermont for many years, and have indicated they feel they're kind of growing out. The jacket is not big enough anymore to host their meeting, and that's obviously a big concern for all of us, because that's an example of industry that's tightly connected with Vermont. But we see other opportunities there, and so the industry has also taken an initiative through the Vermont Election Playing Chamber. We are looking at 3 potential partners. I think Jeff Lawson will talk about that, for feasibility studies that could go parallel with the work that's done by the task force that was initiated. So we very much look forward to working with you on this. How and where this should be, if you look, on other destinations, factors, infrastructure plays a big role. Is there an airport nearby? Is it close to the downtown? Is it walkable? Is there enough hotel room base within walking distance or a short shuttle distance to the convention center? That all plays a role. Also regionally, is it in a location where people can get to, where there's transportation, there's parking, there's the hotel room base too. I mean, you think of, if you have say, a sports event or a concert, what would be a good location to house that? But our interest is particularly also, obviously, the impact on travel. We need new demand generators in Vermont. We're a great state. We have fantastic resources. Leisure travel is still very much focused on vacation weeks, weekends. There's a lot of opportunity in the midweeks, Sunday nights through Thursdays, where if you look, there's still a lot of hotel space that's available. And so it's a great opportunity, and that a convention center would fit in that. We also, we miss out on a lot of meetings that just pass on Vermont because they just can't be hosted here because of the size. With current facilities in the state, we can host a meeting of maybe up to 400 people, but that's really kind of the limit. And if you look at the types, and again, a feasibility study will point out what is that sweet spot between size of convention center, number of available hotel rooms, infrastructure related to this, transportation, etc. But I can think of many examples other than VCIA, how this conversation started. That would be a fit here. I think it could tie into other industries as well. I was talking to Anson Tevitz the other day, and he said, I wish we could have the American Cheese Society have their meeting here. There is no place to hold it. And think about the impact if you could host those here. Vermont takes a leading role in that agricultural sector, and artisanal cheeses particularly. If you could host it here in Vermont, and the impact it could have on other businesses related to that. As far as location, if we look at where is the infrastructure available, I know it comes down fairly quickly to Burlington, but we got to, and we have to think about what impact that would have. We're in Burlington within the next couple of years. As 2 more hotels opening, we'll have 1,000 hotel rooms in the downtown area. That's an important infrastructure piece that would be needed. But we also need to look at what impact it could have outside of Burlington. And as many conferences, and you travel yourself, probably been to conferences, I've been to a few in San Francisco, and what do? You add 2 days, you go to the wine country. I mean, I think there's opportunities for these travelers to also experience other parts of Vermont once they are here, for leisure travel added to it. It will support our businesses, it will support our larger institutions, medical, educational. Those are also drivers of potential business for this convention center, but it also supports the businesses. So we're very appreciative of this committee taking on or taking the initiative, this task force. We obviously strongly support Section 10 and that S122, and we are very willing and able to participate in every possible way we can, and happy to take any questions you have too.
Are there any questions?
I know Jeff Lawson will be much more articulate than I am. He's a better job at it.
This is not the only testimony we have on this topic. That's, yeah.
All right.
Thank you. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate you, your time, and thank you. Good to see you again.
Is it you or Jeff?
Oh, we're Jeff.
Jeff, could join us. Thank you.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to speak on this subject. Fair warning, I'm not more articulate than Hans, just so you know, but I will do my best here. This is the convention center meeting space topic, historically is one that has kind of percolated up in Greater Burlington every 10, 15, 20 years or so. We do have a couple of studies in our archive dating back to one from 1997, and then one from about 2014, which is not so much a study as a survey of our kind of competitive set. I think the reason it's percolating back up right now is that as a region and as a state, we're just far closer now to making something like this happen than we ever were in the past. I think the results of the first study basically, as Tim Shea, who used to run the Vermont Convention Bureau, summed up to me, there were 3 reasons we couldn't build a convention center in Vermont. The first was money, the second was money, and the third was money. The survey work in 2014 really just took a look at what our competitive destinations have for meeting infrastructure and facilities without particularly deep conclusions as to how we should move forward, let alone if we should move forward. I think, as Hans mentioned, we have a much better bead on the significance of the tourism industry as a whole in the state through some of the work that BDTM has been doing, particularly with their contract through tourism economics, doing deeper financial modeling and economic impact work. So we know conclusively we are a $4 billion industry in the state, and we also know conclusively that Chittenden County is a little over $1 billion of that. In Chittenden County, we're really fortunate to have the airlift that BTV provides us, as well as the economic backbone of the medical center and the university and a burgeoning tech center. And we tend to look at tourism through the lens of the visitor economy, and that's the terminology we typically use. We look at business travel just as much as we look at leisure travel, where throughout the rest of the state, weekends are strong. Same with us. What we're really hoping to do now with an initiative like this is boost midweek business, not just for revenue purposes, but really to start acting essentially as a broader economic driver outside of simple economic impact into starting to answer some of the demographic challenges that we face as a region and as a state, namely talent attraction and augmenting the aging workforce and putting some of our fast and large employers on a faster track toward national and international recognition. The way I see it, some of our really evolved counterparts are doing very well using the meeting and conference industry to play to their knowledge centers. For example, if we were to start promoting Burlington as a great place for meetings in the tech sector, in higher ed, for sure, in healthcare, for sure. What we essentially can start to do is really put our region on the figurative map of those industries, and also create really excellent recruiting opportunities for some of those fast and large growing employers, essentially operating a little more toward B2B than B2C as we do with leisure marketing, if that makes any sense at all. I think What we're going to be doing in the next little bit is actually undertaking a study of our own, looking specifically at Greater Burlington. As Hans mentioned, a couple of tipping factors for us right now that have started this conversation back up is what we'll see is the increased room inventory in downtown Burlington. You know, by the end of 2026, if all goes according to schedule, we will see about a 50% increase in the room inventory downtown. Once we hit that 1,000-room mark, hotel density is in a place where we actually could sustain a modern meeting and convention facility. More importantly for us, I think we want to take a broader look too to kind of understand what's the other tourism infrastructure that we're lacking or that we could consider at this point. You know, we've been talking with, for example, Higher Ground about being part of this discussion, so we understand what performing arts venues might look like in the future, what we could fold from that angle into this conversation. Vermont Green Football Club has reached out because they're interested in a soccer-specific stadium somewhere in our region. None of these are quick projects that'll turn around quickly, but if we're going to pop the hood on this conversation, we want to do so in a really, really holistic way. I think the important thing for this committee to understand is there's really, given the lack of county governance in the state of Vermont, there's really no way for any one municipality in our region or any other region in the state to tackle an issue like this on their own. We're going to need the state as a partner to make this happen, not just to help us to help with the capital costs of construction, but also to figure out the ongoing maintenance, what that might actually look like. And as Hans had mentioned out, you know, for us, the important stuff is really, we want to play to our knowledge centers of healthcare, tech, and higher ed, but we also want to play to the state's knowledge centers. Captive insurance is the obvious example right now, but agriculture, manufacturing, there's no real reason we're not able to host larger events like that that are putting Burlington or Vermont as a whole kind of in the national spotlight. I think in particular, what we'll be doing with our study is taking a really good look at some of the economic, demographic, and tourism attribute analysis, looking at our region's accessibility, particularly transportation. How easy is it to get to and from Greater Burlington? We're going to look at trends in population growth, income, corporate presence. What are the corporate anchors or the higher ed institutional anchors we could be partners with on something like this? As well, the consulting firm partner that we'll select, and we haven't selected one yet, but we're vetting 3 of them at this time. We'll be looking at what is the walkability, what are the nodes of restaurants, retail, commercial development growth in the region that can make us a more attractive meeting destination as well as a leisure destination. And then what are the tourism attractions and leisure visitation attributes that our region has that make us more attractive as a meeting and conference destination. Also be taking a broader look at industry trends. I don't think there's any slice of the tourism spectrum that was more affected by the pandemic than the meeting and conference industry. That has changed and will continue to, it's not reverting back to normal is probably the quickest way to say it. People are definitely looking for new and alternative destinations, and we've figured out how much we can do remotely. So they're looking for places that are a little off the beaten path, essentially looking for places they'd like to take a vacation to go to a conference to. And I think Burlington's pretty well positioned for that specifically. There's other attributes they'll be going through, looking at demand generator profiles and a bunch of deep sort of consulting type of stuff. But I do feel like the great dovetail between what this committee is talking about in S122 and what we're going to be working on is just taking a look at how the state could play an integral role in making something like this happen and getting it built as well as getting it managed over time. Going back quickly to the county governance piece, it's important to note all of our competitors at a regional level operate as counties. Destination Madison is not Madison, Wisconsin. It's Dane County, Wisconsin. Explore Asheville.
See if we get them back.
Asheville, North Carolina. It's Buncombe, North Carolina. Freeze up.
You did.
You did, but you're back.
We
Sorry
heard
about that.
We heard about Buncombe County, North Carolina, and
Okay.
that was it.
The cliffhanger.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of our counterparts operate at a county level. And as I mentioned before, you know, as individual cities, towns.
Uh-oh.
Wait, same Canada, I guess.
Municipality in Vermont is going to be able to compete at that. We're going to need the state involved. I froze again. I'm just going to leave it there and ask if you have any questions from this.
All right, so are there any questions for Jeff?
I was just curious. I keep hearing rumors of these materials over near the UVM campus
like millions of dollars of materials that were slated for a conference center. Do you have any information on that at all? Is that a thing?
I have a little bit. I can't speak. I'm not terribly knowledgeable on it, but that, as I understand, it wasn't a conference center. It was a sporting facility. The Terrence Center would replace Patrick Gymnasium as for basketball, essentially, maybe volleyball. But in terms of the status of the project, I know it is not in motion at this time. In terms of the value of the materials that have been procured but not used in construction, probably would be a question for someone else, unfortunately. I should point out, we do want to talk with UVM about that facility in particular in our process, as well as the CV Expo, sort of the projects that are in construction or have the kind of longer term legacy facilities throughout, to make sure we're taking a really holistic view of the region before we move forward.
Jeff, just so I understand, so the Lake Champlain Chamber is doing a feasibility analysis on your own, basically.
Yeah.
And then you see this task force as being, how can the state be involved in a conference center? And what is the long-term plan? Is
Exactly.
that accurate?
Yeah. Again, I don't think anyone anywhere in the state's going to have a convention center or conference center without the state being involved, at least not at the scale that will allow us to keep events like the Vermont Captive Insurance Association annual meeting in the state, let alone have 20 to 35 of the 36 of those in the state throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, as I think Hans had mentioned, the captive insurance conversation was the genesis of this process for us when they reached out and said, we really want to stay in Vermont, but we're bursting at the seams. And very quickly, we realized that's a great example. But for us, it doesn't start and stop with that singular event. We want to, again, have 20, 24, 36 of those across the calendar year to really drive the visitor economy, and also drive it Sunday evening through Thursday evening, when most places across the state are not really seeing the occupancy that they would see on the weekend.
And Jeff, what was the timing of the Lake Champlain's task?
This would take about 16 weeks. As to exactly when we can hit go from when we sign the contract, there's probably about a month on that. So I think you could probably say it'll be about 5 months from the time we sign on the dotted line. And we'll be working with GBIC on this project, as well as the State's Department of Economic Development is going to keep a finger on this pulse as well.
Great. So end of year, we should have some good information-ish.
I think in my best case scenario, we'd both be ready with, ours would not be an initial report. It would kind of be the completion of phase one of what would ultimately be a 4-phase project if we go ahead after phase one. But would love to have that ready at about the same time this bill specified the first report would be ready, which I think is November 1st of this year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Jeff? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Austin.
So I don't know how much more there really is for me to lend other than what Jeff has. Obviously, Jeff and the Hello Burlington crew are doing a fantastic job at looking at, for the record, Austin Davis, Director of Government Affairs for the Lake Champlain Chamber. They're doing a fantastic job trying to promote the region and have a holistic viewpoint of all of the assets and partners that we have in the region. I think the thing I would just kind of tag on to or reiterate from the country, and if we want to do big things, we can't have those big things be at a municipal level. I think about Representative Duke Memorial Auditorium. You think about anybody who grew up within 2 hours of Burlington, Vermont, their first big live event was at Memorial Auditorium. But now the Memorial Auditorium is in this such decay and is needing millions of dollars of work. It's a Burlington taxpayer problem. It's a Burlington taxpayer question. It's a Burlington taxpayer solution. Ultimately have to do it. But once that's repaired, or if it's restored, or if it can be a venue again, it's going to be a state asset, state resource that'll attract folks from all over. And so I think that's kind of part of what we see as this task force, their goal, while it's aimed at a convention center and performance venue, there are other large pieces of infrastructure that might not just be hospitality infrastructure, but other infrastructure that we can copy this modeling from and have statewide impact county by county. So I think that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to kind of put a finer point on from Jeff. And thank you folks for your interest and open up to any questions. And as far as, I'll reconvene with Jeff, but as far as the interim report date, that was November 1st. I think as we're kind of moving along a little bit more, I understand the Senate had an appreciation for a November 1st interim report due date. Pushing it even 30 more days might be helpful just to make sure that the interim report lines up with the feasibility study that the Hello Burlington crew is potentially putting together.
Question, where is the nearest convention center? You heard about Madison, Wisconsin, you heard about Buncombe County, North Carolina. What do you think?
Jeff might have the best, I mean, to my knowledge, the closest would probably be Montreal in terms of drive time. But Jeff,
I'd suggest maybe Saratoga.
Yes.
And then Albany's just down the road from there, and then Springfield, Massachusetts for sure. And I can't speak to potentially Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, Bretton Woods and whatnot. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I'd say if I had my pick of all those places to go, I would pick Vermont if they had a convention center option. And I think that's the important thing here is, we have a golden opportunity here is where a place people want to go just to visit anyway. And that is, as you heard from Jeff, that is kind of the genesis of a lot of convention traffic now, is now that we can do a lot more of these, stakeholder meetings via Zoom, we can get these large groups of folks together via Zoom. Now, folks, if they're going to travel, they want to go somewhere they want to tag 2 days onto and see the place, maybe pack their skis, and I think we have a golden opportunity there.
So Austin, as you look at the legislation and the task force, is there membership of the task force that as we've had time to think about this, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense? Do we have the right people included in there? And I know we're going to be asking this of other folks too, but.
To my knowledge, I think that that's a good representative group of folks. I certainly think the RDCs are a valuable resource to have there. It was mentioned earlier to me this morning, perhaps the RPCs might be involved just for the eventual planning of it. While there's a designee from ACCD, I do wonder if we want more specificity and have that be the Department of Economic Development specifically. I think that there might be a tendency to push this to a tourism, representative from ACCD. And while we appreciate that, what we really need in this situation here is more about physical infrastructure, financing, and the nuts and bolts. It can become a tourism conversation once we get into later phases, but right now it's about, financing and infrastructure.
You may have touched on this when I wasn't in the room, but do you have capacity targets for this building?
I think that's part of the feasibility study. We don't want to overbuild and have something that, is a lot to have ongoing operation management of, but it's not being filled to that level. It's not getting the traffic that does that. And I think part of that, unfortunately, where we are is just going to be about site selection and what capacity is allowed within growing, infilling potentially, or, developing. So that's something that we're going to learn in our first phase.
If I may, only a couple of the capacity things that were mentioned that you may have missed was currently at 400 is about the top that we can do. And by the end of next year, if everything goes well, Burlington will have 1,000 hotel rooms capable of supporting something like this. Those might have happened while you were out.
And that's the core. We could have beyond the core as well. And one of the beautiful things about this, in addition to the, the Sunday to Thursday business that Jeff mentioned and filling those room nights, one of the important things is spillover. So I might be wanting to book a stay in the greater Burlington area, and I might initially go to the large lodging properties. However, all of a sudden they're completely full because they're hosting a convention. So I start looking around, and then I start spilling over to the smaller properties, and I start going, oh, well, I guess I'll look at the B&B up the street, or I'll look at this or that. And I think that's something that you can't say enough about in terms of filling everyone's cup. Everyone in the region benefits. The smaller properties benefit when that spillover happens because the room capacities take. Shop owners and the restaurants, they benefit when folks get out of the convention and are tired of the finger cocktails, the hours, finger food, and are like, let's go get a burger. That is helpful. That spills over.
Just so I'm just trying to wrap my head around this capacity thing. I understand that there's somebody searching for it, but since this is kind of being prompted by the captive insurance industry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but do you remember kind of like roughly how many people they were looking to bring in a year?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick it to Jeff. Jeff, what do you have?
Off the top of my head for captive insurance, I believe that's 1,200 attendees over 3 days. So clearly there's no hotel in our neck of the woods or in the state can hold that many. So to Austin's point, that those room blocks are shared across multiple hotel properties around the region.
Yeah, understood. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's a good thing. And just to piggyback on Austin's point about overflow, this also creates what we call compression. So rates go up as revenue managers are assessing supply and demand. We're able to charge more as the demand goes up. So not only are more people, more properties and businesses sharing in that rising tide, but it's generating more tax revenue for the state and for local government as well.
Any other questions for Jeff or Austin? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not your total left.
Yep. Okay, yep. So let's take a break.